Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. In this video, we're going to be looking at Treb Wars and see how much the various technologies available at the university in Castle can help in those situations. The classic scenario is you arrive in Imperial Age at roughly the same time as your opponent with castles facing off, and you both start furiously creating trebuchets, where any small advantage you can give yourself with an extra tech could mean the difference between holding an important hill, gold, or stone pile versus being thrown on the back foot. These could be techs that either directly help the trebuchet deal more damage or help a castle survive slightly longer, and we'll also consider the cost of these techs as part of that equation. We'll start off with chemistry. Beyond the intimidation factor of lighting your projectiles on fire, this technically also improves trebuchet attack by 1. As you might imagine, this is not a very high priority in Treb Wars unless you're in the exact situation of having a Saracen trebuchet with their unique tech but without siege engineers, attacking a Byzantine castle without hoardings that's being constantly repaired by 5 villagers. In that very specific situation, the +1 attack from chemistry lets you take out a castle 1 attack sooner, that is 51 instead of 52 shots. Clearly, it's wrong to say that chemistry's +1 attack never helps, but you have to dig a bit to find cases like this one where it does. So we'll put this at the bottom of the priority list. Or maybe not quite the bottom, as it's just ahead of Ballistics. Someone would be forgiven for thinking this might help in some way, given its icon shows a unit literally sieging a castle. But given castles don't move, it doesn't help in a Treb war whatsoever. If you're playing a mod where buildings can move, then absolutely this is a truly must-grab tech, and the icon would finally make sense. But for regular games, we'll leave it off the list. Getting into the serious contenders then, we'll start with Masonry. This adds 10% to building HP along with some armor, including building armor, which resists anti-building bonus damage, though it turns out the armor has no effect on the number of Treb shots taken. The 10% more HP does help though, letting castles survive 1 more trebuchet attack, and even more significant, they take 2 more hits from an opponent who has siege engineers. Considering the very low cost for this one at 150 food and 175 wood, it gets us off to a good start, and is definitely worth considering on the way up to Imperial Age if you think a Treb war is incoming, or just as a useful general tech for all of your buildings. The only exception is it doesn't affect farms and walls or gates. I'm not sure why stone walls wouldn't benefit from masonry, but there you go. Its follow-up architecture is then a little less impressive. It also gives castles another 1 extra shot from trebuchets, but for a notably higher cost, at 300 food and 200 wood with a 70-second research time, where masonry was 50 seconds. It doesn't hurt and can break up an otherwise equal exchange, still arguably being worth it, but not quite the same level of value. What if I told you though there was a tech giving you the combined benefit of masonry and architecture together in a Treb war? Well, it exists in the game, with Hoardings. This gives your castles the exact same 21% HP increase as masonry and architecture together for 50 less food and 25 more wood. Either way, your castles have an identical 5,808 HP, letting them take 2 more attacks from trebuchets without siege engineers and 3 more attacks from trebuchets with that tech. This maybe goes a bit under the radar as it only affects castles, but in terms of value is in line with those university techs, and takes a similar amount of time to research as architecture on its own at 75 seconds. You can of course stack Hoardings and Masonry, again paying further dividends, with castles taking 25 to 40% more damage from trebuchets, depending on siege engineers. If that saves even 1 castle, considering you're spending food and wood to save something that costs stone, that's a good deal in my book. Adding architecture on top to complete the trifecta then gives another +2 to your castle's durability, making them over 40% more tanky against trebs, so every technology you add has a tangible benefit. Something else worth considering about these HP improvements is the way repairing works. Villagers have a set rate they repair, but the cost is based on what percentage of the building's HP they've restored, meaning more HP makes them more cost efficient. Without upgrades, every enemy trebuchet shot takes 29 stone to fully repair, whereas with masonry and hoardings, each trebuchet shot only takes 22 stone to repair. You're not repairing faster, but it is cheaper to offset any damage your castle is taking. So those are the ways to beef up your castle's tankiness, as well as the benefits of doing so. But how does this all compare to getting siege engineers at the university? Siege engineers increases the bonus damage of your trebuchets by 20%, which is actually a little less powerful than it might sound, as trebuchets have 200 base pierce attack and a hidden 250 bonus against buildings, which is the only part that's affected, bumping that up to 300. The net effect is only about 12% more damage being dealt against castles overall, while costing 500 food and 600 wood, making it the most expensive tech we've seen so far. Of course, it also gives trebuchets +1 range, which I don't want to dismiss, and that effect being added to your existing scorpions and onagers can also be impactful. Even on your trebuchets, being able to sit one tile farther back and still reach an enemy castle might allow them to be in a safer location, and you certainly don't want to lose trebs for free. So Siege Engineers clearly helps in more ways than just raw damage. I'm not discounting any of that. However, specifically in terms of how much it helps destroy enemy castles, it's less impactful than you might assume, only reducing the number of attacks required by 1 or 2, essentially cancelling out with enemy masonry for a much higher cost. More attack and range is definitely the sexier way to try to win a Treb war, but a pattern coming out here is you can get similar or better results in reverse by focusing on the tankiness of your own castles instead, or is at least something worth considering, especially since you can get masonry on the way up to Imperial Age, unlike the other techs we mentioned. One last generic tech that may also come to mind in a Treb war, albeit indirectly, is then Conscription. This speeds up the rate you train military units by 33%, raising an interesting question about whether or not it makes sense to rush this out first and then start making trebuchets at a faster clip, or if you're better off just going straight into trebuchet production immediately when hitting Imperial Age. Trebuchets take 50 seconds to train, about 11 seconds to unpack, and then fire once every 10 seconds, and Conscription sets that whole process back by 1 minute if you're doing all of this on the same castle. But after that point, your trebuchets start coming out 12 seconds sooner. That's a lot of numbers to keep track of, but if we put those things together, picking up Conscription first and then starting trebuchet production obviously sets you behind in making the first few trebs, but you catch up a little shy of 4 minutes later. After that point, of course, having Conscription research will let you start to get a Treb numbers advantage, and 4 minutes feels like a reasonable break-even point. However, I'd argue this is a very misleading way to think about it. Ultimately, it's not the number of trebuchets that's most important, but the area under the curve, or damage, those trebuchets have done. If instead of trebuchet numbers, we look at the total damage output over time, at 4 minutes for example, opening with Conscription first leads to about a third less damage being done by your trebuchets up to that point, as you started doing that damage significantly later. If we look at the cumulative amount being done in each case, it's not until more like 7 minutes into Imperial that a single castle researching Conscription first has caught up. From this, it's pretty obvious if you hit Imperial Age with a single castle and want to take out an enemy castle quickly, you skip Conscription. The exception is if you have another freed up castle elsewhere that's uninvolved in producing trebuchets, and in that case Conscription is a nice tech to pick up in that one. It's just Treb Wars specifically, where you want a castle on the front lines making trebuchets ASAP. Of course, Vietnamese get Conscription for free, and Berbers can research Casbah on the way up to Imperial Age, so there are exceptions as always. In fairness, a similar argument could be levied against Hoardings as well, since it's also a tech at the castle competing for trebuchet build time, and you're unquestionably better off with a castle in the line of fire to be producing trebuchets as soon as you can. Now just before we finish, while I did want to keep this focused on the generic technologies, there are 2 unique techs in particular that are worth mentioning while we're on the topic. Many of the trebuchet bonuses and techs, for one reason or another, don't actually impact their ability to take out castles, largely because accuracy, range, and durability of the trebuchets doesn't factor in. But there are 2 to note: Catapruto for Japanese and counterweights for Saracens. In terms of damage output, Catapruto leads to a 33% faster fire rate, which basically cancels out with Masonry plus Hoardings. You're doing a third more damage against a castle that tanks a third more, so you get back to a regular trebuchet in castle dynamic. Notably, Catapruto is a little less expensive than those 2 techs together in total resources as well, but it does cost gold. The Saracens, on the other hand, only get 15% added to their pierce attack alone from the unique tech, and in most cases, this lets you take out a castle 1 hit sooner, meaning it basically offsets Masonry for a much higher cost at 650 food and 500 gold. Where this tech mostly comes in handy is that it lets you take out other trebuchets in 2 shots rather than the usual 3, so it's better in the style of Treb War where you're focusing down enemy trebs instead of castles. I've looked at the best and worst Treb sit bonuses and techs in the past though, and just wanted to mention these 2 quickly so you don't think I forgot them, but there's a lot of discussion to be had once you go down the rabbit hole of civilization specific bonuses. To summarize the main takeaways here though, if you have a castle facing off and suspect you're racing toward a Treb war, every tech you can research either on the way up with Masonry or after reaching Imperial Age will have an effect, with Hoardings giving you essentially the combined effect of Masonry and Architecture 2 for 1 with a similar price. Siege Engineers then basically offsets 1 HP related technology of your opponent, with a benefit to your siege range as well, as arguably the greater impact. A couple of final notes to remember are first to repair your castles if able, and keep in mind the efficiency of that is improved by HP upgrades. It takes 7 villagers per trebuchet to safely keep up repairing and not lose a castle in the long run, and is a good approximation even if your opponent has siege engineers. That'll do it for this one though. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next time.